Hello, sports fans. It is Tuesday, November the 12th, the year 2013, and as usual, a lot to get to in the sports world, so let's get it going right now. And we are ready for week 12 of the college football season. And once again, we are joined by Mr. Joe Spano from Sirius Satellite Radio by way of the Sports Bylines. I got to get that in there.
By way of the Sports Byline Broadcast Network. That's
there you
perfect.
go. Joe, I have to start with last week's schedule.
All right, let's get into it.
Me and you were banging the drum on how great the college football was going to be last week.
Right.
And I haven't talked to you, so I don't know your opinion yet.
We briefly emailed back and forth, but nothing of any substance. We saved it all for today.
No, absolutely. I was so disappointed in the way the games played out last week. I mean, I was so disappointed in the Baylor-Oklahoma game. I'm going to get to Stanford-Oregon in a second. I'm going to save that one for a little bit. Even the Alabama game got out of hand at the end. And no, Pittsburgh upsetting Notre Dame did not save the weekend for me, and I'm sure it didn't save it for you.
It certainly didn't save it for me, but it's been a bit of a tough year for Notre Dame with everything they've gone through before their season ever started. It's just one of those years. They'll rebound next year.
But let's start with the Baylor-Oklahoma game. This game was a sloppy, ugly mess in the first half, and then Baylor just blew them out in the second half. What has happened to the Oklahoma we used to know? Before you say it, where are the five-star recruits? Where are the big-time receivers? Where's the big quarterback? Where are the big running backs? What has happened to Oklahoma? Bob Stoops has lost it. He is not recruiting well anymore. I cannot believe how bad of a game they played against Baylor. It was a sloppy, ugly mess of a game, and they had their chances in the first half.
Absolutely.
Baylor was playing just as ugly as they were, and Oklahoma could not take advantage of it.
It was absolutely a defensive struggle early, and, suddenly the Baylor Bears offense got in gear and had all the answers while OU had no answers. Now, you asked me a question about a minute ago about where are all the five-star recruits. Here's the deal. They're still getting those five-star recruits. But sometimes, as is the norm in college football, not all these five-star recruits work out. Some programs seem to pick the right ones. Some pick the wrong ones. And right now, OU's having a run where they're picking the wrong five-star recruits. They still have the top recruiting classes. And if you remember, coming into this year, they were considered a top 5 program coming in. They were ranked easily inside the top 10.
Absolutely.
They were considered a national title contender by many, and once again, they do not meet expectations. They're now a 2-loss team. They get blown out by Baylor. Sometimes what happens is those 5-star guys you recruit just don't work out, and they don't play like 5-star guys, and what results is disappointing finishes. But at some point, on the other side of it, you have to start looking at Bob Stoops. Every year, they're considered a national title contender in Norman, and every year they lose 1 or 2 key games that keep them out of the national title chase. And to be honest with you, for OU to lose to Baylor, this is obviously this is obviously 2 different kind of programs. Baylor's a Johnny-come-lately.
Right.
OU is steeped in tradition. When you look at these 2 programs, OU never, and nobody ever wants to lose to anybody. But it's one thing if you're OU and you lose to Texas, or you're OU and you lose to USC, or you're OU and you lose to Florida State,
right?
And that kind of thing. But when you're OU and you lose to Baylor,
and they got smacked around in the second half.
They absolutely did. Those are the type of games that really set back your program if you're OU, because you're a transcendent program. You're one of the true big boys, and Baylor's an upstart. And when an upstart like that smacks you around, it hurts you in the short term, and it hurts you in the long term in recruiting as well.
No, absolutely. I am so down on Oklahoma, so down on Bob Stoops, and I'm not saying Bob Stoops should be fired.
Well, we've talked about it here, how the griddle is going to have to start to get hot under Bob Stoops, because each and every year in Norman and around the country, everybody looks at OU as a true national title contender. Not a fringe contender,
no.
A true national title contender. And every year they end up on the, right around number 10, Sometimes they're just inside the top 10. Sometimes they're just outside the top 10. But it's been a long time since OU has been a true national title contender as we've gotten to the back end of the season.
And they keep putting up that graphic every Oklahoma game I watch. Bob Stoops is the winningest coach since the year 2000. And Mac Brown is like right up there with him.
Right.
And I'm down on both of them, actually. They keep putting up that graphic. The problem with that graphic is it's top heavy. He's going on a downward decline. He got off to such a hot start at Oklahoma, won a national title, and it's just on a steady decline each and every season.
And that's a fair statement. If Mark Richt at Georgia is under the kind of pressure that he's under, why would Bob Stoops, off of one national title, that's an awful long time ago now, be immune to that same pressure in a far weaker conference with a far more transcendent program? I mean, Georgia does have a nice football history.
Right.
But they're not OU.
No, they're not. And I'm not saying Mark Richt or Bob Stoops should be fired. Now, Mac Brown, I think, should step away, although Texas is rallying this year after we bashed them. They're not beating anyone great, but they are winning. They're up there in the top of the Big 12. I'm not saying these guys should be necessarily fired, but I mean, they have to start getting their act together. I mean, this is a terrible job by Bob Stoops in Oklahoma. I cannot believe how bad
I
they
can
played.
make a case that Bob Stoops should be fired.
Yeah, I'm not going to go that far.
It won't happen, but at some point the griddle is going to get hot under him, and I have a feeling there's going to be incredible pressure next season on Bob Stoops to deliver a 10-plus win season, win the Big 12, and go to a BCS Bowl. Anything short of that is going to end up with Bob Stoops being fired.
And I'll tell you what, Bell, the quarterback, who you liked more than I did, his stats for this game. Now, this is against.
Would you believe he was a guy that was recruited out of high school as a throwing quarterback?
Right.
And just after watching that game, you probably wouldn't believe
this
it. But
is
he was.
against Baylor's defense, and granted, Baylor's defense may be better than we thought.
Well, I got to tell you something to cut you off there.
Maybe
they're a lot better than we thought.
Right.
That defense was physical in the trenches. And boy, were they athletic in that back seven. They were flying all over the football field.
They may be better than we thought, but in the year 2013, when you throw for 150 yards and 2 interceptions on the road, you're not winning many games. And that's
not
what
college
he did.
Football, that's for sure.
That's what he did. This is Oklahoma. I am just stunned. And here's another thing. This is both teams. How sloppy was this game? Let me give you the penalty yards in this game. This was accepted penalties. Forget the ones they declined. Oklahoma, 13 penalties for 100 yards. They almost had more penalty yards than passing yards.
Yeah.
Baylor, 12 penalties for 120 yards. The whole first half of the game, penalty, run a play, penalty. I was going crazy.
There was no flow.
No flow.
And a team like Baylor needs that flow to get that high-octane offense going. And when you look back at this football game, the first half of this football game was all about those defenses. And when you look at that, you're saying to yourself going in, boy, if it's going to go like this, there's no way Baylor can compete.
Absolutely.
And the realities are, we haven't watched a lot of Baylor football, and we've looked at them a bit, but we haven't sat there and watched 60 minutes of Baylor football on a week-in, week-out basis because they're not playing it. They haven't played anybody yet.
No, absolutely not.
So
We're
now
not going to watch them against Louisiana Monroe.
Right. So now you watch them against some real competition. And I got to tell you something. I understand on offense they weren't what they were. But give Petty a lot of credit. He took over that football game. He put himself on the fringe of the Heisman Trophy race as well. And I thought he did a great job in the second half of being the one offensive unit that could do something. He led the way for those Baylor Bears. And in the second half they were much better offensively. But what won the game for Baylor was that defense. That defense was far better than I think anybody in the country believed they could be. Physical in the trenches and more physical and able to beat up Oklahoma in the trenches and as athletic as any back seven you will find in America.
And in the first half, Oklahoma had their chances and Baylor came up big on defense time and time again, and then finally the offense got rolling in the second half, which you figured it would. Good night, Oklahoma. So I don't want to take anything away.
Would you agree that Baylor's legitimately for real and belongs in the national title discussion?
Oh, absolutely.
Something that you would have questioned going into this game because, again, they had put up great numbers, but they hadn't played anybody. And I got to tell you this, that defense is worlds better than I ever thought it could be.
And I'm going to ask you this question later. Well, actually, I'm asking it right now.
Ask it now.
Would a one-loss Stanford team stay ahead of an undefeated Baylor team.
We've been discussing this all week.
Alabama and Ohio State lost, and you have Florida State sitting there as
So
one of the teams.
now it's wide open for Stanford.
Right. Or would you go with an undefeated Baylor? Or are you going to have a one-loss Alabama back in the picture? I mean, I don't know. I mean,
one loss. You could have that happen. Now it gets tricky. Alabama's loss would be late, but it's to a high-ranked team. Stanford's loss is early. Both Stanford has most of their schedule behind them already. The Notre Dame matchup is not a biggie.
No.
The Pac-12 championship game is a fringe top 25
we don't know who
team.
they're going to play
Right.
yet.
It could be Arizona State,
Could be
or it could be
UCLA.
UCLA, which are fringe top 25 teams.
Right.
Now, Baylor still has some tough matchups left on their schedule.
Oak State.
However, Oak State, who's creeping towards the top 10,
Texas.
now that they found their offense. Texas, who's creeping into the top 25, and Texas Tech, who's lost 3 straight.
Yeah, they're going down the tubes.
But, so, if you look at it right now, the one-loss team is ahead of the undefeated team. They both have similar schedules going forward, with a slight nod towards Baylor. But I think the human polls will end up making sure that Baylor jumps ahead of Stanford in the BCS, because I don't think you want an undefeated Baylor who, if they run that table, will have beaten Texas,
Right.
OU, Oklahoma State. They would have beaten enough teams and done it impressively enough that they should be ahead of a one-loss Stanford. And I think they will.
And remember, Stanford lost to Utah. And yes, Utah is good at home. They are now under 500 for the season. That is an albatross on Stanford's head right now.
And the computer will kind of shake all this stuff out. But I think what will happen is the human polls will jump Baylor ahead of Stanford.
Right.
And then what will happen is the computer, as things shake out, will probably do just enough to push undefeated Baylor fractions of a point ahead of Stanford. But that will be a close race all the way through. That is going to be very dependent not only on both of those two teams winning, but also the other teams on their schedule winning games
Right.
when they're not playing when they're not playing the two teams in question.
And Baylor's going to get hurt because I've said this a million times. No Big 12 championship.
Well, you don't
game.
have another opportunity to play a ranked team. Sure.
Right. Now, would you prefer that? Would you hope that the Big 12 actually gets a championship game down the line? Are they going to be able
Well, they need to get 2 more teams.
Now, that's my question. Would you be okay with them playing a championship game if they had only 10 teams? Like,
it doesn't matter to me.
Like, say
Why
they
not?
go to the NCAA and say, hey, listen, NCAA, we only have 10 teams. Can we still have a championship game? And maybe the NCAA,
Would give them a waiver.
gives them a break. Would you be okay with that?
I've got no problems with it. I'm always about more football, and it gives a team like Baylor an opportunity to improve their stock by playing another ranked team.
Why do we have to have 12 teams? Like, why is 12 the magic number?
Because I guess because with those 12-team conferences, they're actually split into divisions.
Right.
And what happens is now you can have a division winner play another division winner. There is no division in the Big 12
Well,
with
that's
only
what I'm
10
saying.
teams.
Take the
It's
10,
one conference.
Split them 5 and 5 or something.
You
or
could do that.
Something like that. And another thing, you would think Baylor would go ahead of Alabama if Alabama lost. Even though Alabama would have one. Now, the SEC gets a lot of respect.
One-loss Alabama will stay ahead of one-loss Stanford.
Yes.
Now you got a real interesting question. Does one-loss Alabama, who loses late and lost the top 10 Auburn, did they do enough to stay ahead of Baylor?
Right.
That's such a tough question to answer. But if I were to fashion a guess, believe it or not, I think one-loss Alabama can stay ahead of undefeated Baylor, but I don't quite think one-loss Stanford can stay ahead of undefeated Baylor, even though Alabama loses late, just because you'd be losing more than likely to either top 10 Auburn or in the SEC championship game, possibly top 10 Missouri or top 10 South Carolina.
And Nick Saban...
While again, Stanford had lost to Utah, who is going to end up perhaps with 1 or 2 conference wins.
No, absolutely. Alabama, Nick Saban over the years has gotten a lot of breaks with the BCS polls. They've lost, even at LSU, they lost games, and he's managed to get himself back in that national title game. He's gotten some breaks. Alabama has lost games. LSU lost games when he was there, and they've gotten back into that national title
And a lot
race.
of that has to do with the respect of the SEC.
Absolutely.
And the respect that the SEC garners, the schedule that Alabama plays. If they do lose, they're losing to a top 10 team. They can probably manage to stay ahead of Baylor. They'll certainly be ahead of one-loss Stanford, despite the simple fact that it's contrary to everything we've always been led to believe, which is the later you lose, the worse it is. That won't apply to Alabama.
Here's another question. Say Auburn beats Alabama. Where do they end up in this? Because,
Well, they're one loss. They're still.
but then they would have beaten the #1 team.
But they're not going to be able to climb everybody. It doesn't work like that. They won't be able to climb past Stanford, past Baylor,
What if they win
past
the
Ohio
SEC title
State.
game?
I don't think they can climb. I
The
think
SEC gone is a
you
lot
can,
of respect.
right, you can hop past 18, maybe to. You'd be asking Auburn to hop past a lot of teams.
I just know,
including some in their own conference.
I just know
Because
that.
now let's say Auburn beats Alabama, goes to the SEC championship game, and then turns around and loses to Missouri.
Oh well, that's a given. They didn't have 2 losses. That's a given. I'm saying, say they.
Well,
beat
no,
them.
then Missouri would have a case. Because their only loss would be to South Carolina, who would probably end up somewhere in the top 10, top 15.
Remember, though,
and you would have won the SEC championship.
Missouri's got 2 tough games on their schedule left. At Ole Miss, Texas A&M, so they could
Absolutely,
lose too.
they could.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying, let's say it went that way. It's going to be hard for any one-loss team. I think almost impossible for any one-loss team other than Stanford and Alabama to have a chance to stay in it ahead of an undefeated team that isn't named Fresno State or Northern Illinois.
I would agree with that totally. Bring on the Final Four next year because I cannot
That solves
stand
all of these
talking
problems.
about this anymore. I mean,
The truth is, 8 is where they need to
Absolutely,
be. Because the teams at 8, 9, and 10, the Clemsons of the world that have the one, they don't really have an argument. You get me to 8,
no, absolutely.
every team with a case for being in the playoffs is there. 4 is a start. It's better than 2. But you can see with a year like this, even 4 may not be enough.
No, I absolutely agree. All right, getting back to what I was talking about. I was so disappointed in last week's game. The Baylor game I was completely disappointed in. The Alabama game got ugly. It was
But
good.
that game went. You know what? That game went exactly how I told.
Right.
When we discussed this game last week, did I not tell you?
Absolutely.
Here's what's going to happen. Alabama LSU is going to be a tight game for about 2.5 quarters. All of a sudden, some point in the third quarter, Alabama's going to get some separation, run away, and hide. And that's exactly what you had happen. And it could have been different. Because once Alabama went up 2 scores, LSU comes back on the subsequent kickoff return, returns it deep into Alabama territory, and that Alabama defense steps up, bows its neck. LSU comes away empty, and that's the end of that football game.
Right, I wanted a little more drama in the fourth quarter of that game.
I just don't think you were going to get it. As good as Alabama is, and as much as LSU's improved on offense, and Mettenberg is a terrific quarterback, LSU's limitations on defense showed in this game.
Not good.
And Alabama's ability as an offensive juggernaut who can do things a number of different ways, coupled with that defense that is now back to vintage Alabama defense,
Absolutely.
that makes them hard to beat, and they are that much better than LSU.
So I didn't like the Baylor-Oklahoma game. I was disappointed in Alabama. Me personally. Florida State bombed Wake Forest. I mean, another beating right there.
Again, other than BC,
Right.
they have taken everybody weak or strong on their schedule in dominating fashion.
Auburn rolled over Tennessee. It was close early.
Nick Marshall did play in that one, and he looked fine.
Tennessee couldn't stop him at all. I mean, it was like Swiss cheese, the defense of Tennessee. Missouri destroyed Kentucky. Fresno was all over Wyoming. I know Pitt
Poor
upset-
Missouri, but for 1 quarter of football,
Right.
they're right there in a national title chase as well.
Pitt, I know they upset Notre Dame, but we were talking about this. That wasn't. I mean, those 2 teams aren't great. Notre Dame's got 3 losses.
Right, they're not a great Notre Dame team this
I
year.
watched a little bit of Arizona State beat Utah, and I'm shaking my head at this.
Talk about a struggle.
I'm shaking my head.
Everybody struggles in Utah.
Right.
You're right about it. They're dangerous in Utah. We've talked about it all year long. The only win they've pulled at home in conference is against Stanford. But they gave UCLA fits. They gave Arizona State fits.
And I was shaking my head again at this game because Arizona State is up 7-0. Utah scores to make it 7-6. What do they do?
Go for two.
Go for two. What do they lose by? 1 point. I was shaking my head.
You don't want to be in a position the rest of the game to be chasing points.
Why in the world, in the first quarter of a 7-6 game, are you going for 2 points? Can someone please explain this to me?
I will never get that because I will give you a rule to live by as it relates to the 2-point conversion. Don't go for it until you absolutely have to. Because if you miss it, you're always chasing points.
Absolutely.
So you don't go for it until you need to. And you usually don't start looking at it in reasonably close games until sometime in the fourth quarter.
I didn't even like, who was it, last night? The Dolphins went for 2 in the third quarter. I didn't even like that. There was no reason to go for 2 there.
You're in the game, and you don't need to do it.
Now, let me get to the Stanford-Oregon game, because Stanford manhandled Oregon. Let me say this. Don't look at the final score of this game.
Doesn't tell a story.
Very deceiving. 26-20? Oh, no. We know better. This game was an ugly, disgusting performance for Oregon. I cannot believe how bad the Oregon Ducks played in this game. Give all credit to Stanford, and I like Stanford. And we've been on Stanford a lot this year. We like Stanford. And the coach was saying, against Utah, they threw the ball too much. And they got back to running the ball after they saw that.
And boy, did they pound the rock in this one.
The coach said when they played Utah, they were throwing the ball all over the place. They watched the film. They said, we got to get back to running. And sure enough, since they have, they've been stomping on people. Kind of like when Florida State played Boston College. The defensive coordinator looked at the tape. He said, we're doing things a little wrong here on defense. I'm coaching these guys the wrong way. Changed their whole defensive style. Florida State's bombarding everyone. So Stanford just manhandled Oregon. Let's put Stanford aside for now. They did a great job in this game.
All right.
The Oregon Ducks, what planet were they on in this game? I cannot believe how miserable of a game, a lifeless performance by Oregon. Let me start it off for you. First of all, Oregon gets the ball first. They go right down the field. They have a guy wide open in the end zone. They underthrow him. They have to punt. Then they actually stop Stanford on their first drive. One of the first times, if not the only time, they stopped them 3 and out. Oregon goes down the field on their second drive. They get to the 4-yard line.
Oops.
4th and 4. What do? How about you kick the field goal there? No. Let's go for it. Typical Oregon. Let's go for it, 4th and 4. Stop there, and from that point on, the game was over. Why is Oregon on...
You forgot about the red zone fumble, too.
Oh, no, I got that written down. 4th and 4 in a 0-0 game. Why are you going for it there? Take your 3 points. You're on the road. Get a little momentum. No, so they don't do that. Then Stanford starts to get their running game going. I mean, we know Oregon's defense is not that good. Stanford goes up 14-0. Then Oregon goes down the field again in the second quarter. This is the fumble you're talking about. They fumble at the 2-yard line. I mean, Stanford actually rips the ball away. I mean, Oregon showed no fight even trying to get that ball. And that running back, by the way, talked a lot before the game.
Said Oregon was going to score 40.
Right. He didn't even fight for that ball. The Stanford player just ripped it right out of his hands, and the Stanford wanted it more. From that point on, this game to me was over. Oregon left, to me, 17 points on the field in the first 2 quarters. And Stanford got their running game going, and they were pounding and pounding. Oregon couldn't stop them. And then when Oregon got the ball, they were lifeless. I mean, what happened to this Heisman Trophy quarterback? I mean,
Mariota wasn't great.
And I don't want to hear he got hurt either. I don't want to hear about that. No excuses, Oregon. Oregon talks a big game. As a matter of fact, Sports Illustrated last week. Oregon Ducks, they're coming for you, SEC. Do you see what that says?
Not this year.
They're coming for the SEC?
Not this year.
They can't even beat Stanford.
Well,
they can't even win the Pac-12. When they played Auburn in the title game, they played another one of these low-scoring defensive games, which is right up Auburn's alley.
Well, this is something you alluded to, and let's give you credit. You've talked about the blueprint being written on how to beat the Oregon Ducks. You know, we've talked about it a lot. Styles make fights. Auburn is Stanford. I keep saying Auburn. You got Auburn in my.
Well, Auburn beats Oregon in that title game.
Stanford is one of the few teams in Division I college football right now that is really that grinded out physical team. There are a handful of teams that can play that kind of football.
They're a throwback team.
Right. In today's college football, everybody's wide open. Everybody's like Baylor and Oregon. Some do it better than others. But the bottom line, there are only a handful of good teams that really can grind out football and play physical football on the major college level. Stanford's one of them. When you play that kind of football and you play it real well, Oregon doesn't have any answers. You go back to that matchup against Auburn in the BCS title game, and they pushed Oregon around. You look last year where Stanford beat Oregon in overtime and pushed them around. You look this year again. Stanford pushed Oregon all over the football field. They ran the ball down their throats. They picked up every big third down on the ground.
That's another thing.
And Oregon simply on defense could not get them off the field. And that's the bottom line.
One point of the game, Stanford was 11 of 12 on third down and had made 11 in a row.
If you can't get a team off the field on third down, you can't win the football game.
And I was not
a
even
big story
surprised about that. I know Oregon's defense is not that good.
See, I've liked the athleticism they've shown. They've shown a little more physicality up until this game. But when you played a team that's as physical as Stanford, the Oregon Ducks had no answers, Mike.
Oregon seemed like a one-trick pony on offense to me. Once they couldn't get it going, they looked like they were flat. They looked like they quit at one point. From like the late second quarter to late fourth quarter, they did nothing. The game was 26-0 in the fourth quarter. It was 26-7 with 5 minutes left before they blocked the field goal, return that, and then they get the onside kick. Even after they got the onside kick the first time, they took too much time getting it in the end zone, and they burned all their timeouts. So by the time they tried onside kick number 2, Stanford recovered, and all they had to do was run 3 plays. The game was over.
That's it.
Oregon played one of the worst big games I have seen in a while. I was so disappointed. I was so excited that night for football. Baylor had just bombed Oklahoma, and here I am looking at a 26-0 game in the fourth quarter, and Oregon has 0 points. 0 points. I don't want to hear about Oregon anymore. As a matter of fact, we're not even going to pick Oregon this week. We're not even going to pick their game. They are banned from this week. I don't want to hear them anymore this year. Until they become a more physical team, I don't want to hear about them anymore. I see Oregon.
And you were the guy that wouldn't pick against them all year, no matter what.
I wouldn't.
Who picked against them last week?
You did, and I was so disappointed in Oregon. I mean, I could see if they lost the game. Stanford's a very good team. But the way it just played out...
Score doesn't tell the story.
No!
It was 26-0 after 3 quarters.
It was over.
I mean, you started getting nervous late if you were Stanford when you looked and it became a one-score game. You were starting to worry a little bit.
Right, and if Oregon, after they got that first onside kick, if they would have got in quickly there with about 3 minutes to go, they still had a timeout, maybe could have got the ball back. Yeah. Instead... they're fumbling and bumbling. They got to use a timeout.
They also would have had to lean on their defense, which wasn't stopping.
No, they probably weren't going to stop them anyway. But so there was a glimmer of hope, but as quickly as it came, it went.
Absolutely.
I mean, so Oregon, I don't want to hear about them anymore.
You won't hear from
and listen, I like what Oregon's done with their program. Back in the day, they used to be the laughingstock of college football. All everyone did was make fun of their uniforms. Yeah. Now the uniforms are trendy. Let's change them every...
Well, when you win, winning solves everything. They win, so it's trendy.
They redid the stadium. They're up in the top 10 every year. I give them credit. But now... they got to get to that next level. And don't give me articles in Sports Illustrated here about how they're ready.
Well, it's the jinx. It's all Sports Illustrated's fault they lost.
They're coming for USCC. Are you kidding me? Who are they coming for? Who are they coming for?
They ain't coming for Alabama.
Are they coming for Vanderbilt? Who are they coming for?
They ain't coming for Alabama, I can tell you that.
I was so let down by Oregon. The quarterback, I thought, played a miserable game. I thought their offense was atrocious. Their defense was just as bad. I was so disappointed in the Oregon Ducks. They were the most disappointing team to me of the whole weekend. And I thought it was a very disappointing weekend in general, and they were the biggest goat of the weekend.
Let me ask you a question.
Yes.
Who was the most impressive team for you on the weekend?
Well, I like what Florida State is doing, but they play nobody. I mean, I like Florida State overall, what they're doing, as you know. But you'd have to say Stanford. I mean, with the way
I say Baylor. I loved what Baylor did.
I'm going to say Stanford was the most impressive because I'm down on Oklahoma too, and I thought that Baylor game was sloppy.
I'm going to pick Baylor just because they showed you something on defense that I guarantee you people around the country, outside of those that really follow Baylor Bears football week in, week out in a way that most people who were trying to spotlight those games to watch do not follow the Baylor Bears. I didn't think they had that kind of defense.
No, they definitely were better than I thought, but they had 12 penalties for 135 yards. It's so sloppy and choppy.
Okay.
So overall,
You'll pick Stanford.
for
I'll pick
last
Baylor.
week, I'm going to say Stanford was more impressive. Overall, recently, I'm going to say Florida State. As a matter of fact, I'm leaning towards Florida State to win this national title in an upset if they play Alabama. I am leaning towards Florida State. I am super impressed with what they're doing.
And I'm not an Alabama fan by any stretch of the imagination, but I'm in love with that team this year.
Oh,
You've heard-
they're very
And you've
good.
heard me extol their virtues.
I can't argue with it.
They have everything in addition to things that they've never had before, which is an elite quarterback.
They will be favored against whoever they play, but I would right now lean towards Florida State to upset them.
Okay.
And I'm very happy right now, actually,
And,
that Oregon
you know,
lost.
we'll be talking about that in about
Right.
I don't know,
So as miserable
50 days.
So as miserable as Oregon played, the silver lining for me is I wanted Alabama, Florida State, and right now that's what I'm getting. Florida State's not losing the rest of this year.
No.
Alabama has a better chance of losing than Florida State.
Absolutely, but they still have some potholes in front of them. Alabama, Florida State has little in front.
And I don't want to hear Urban Meyer and Ohio State saying they're going to wipe the field with either Alabama or Florida State. Listen, Ohio State,
No, they're not.
pipe down. Please, go beat Michigan State in the Big Ten title game. Go beat those teams. Ohio State, you know, it's funny. How many times has the Big Ten come up short in championship games?
Well, they have a history of
A million
coming up
times.
short in championship games. A lot of the big bowl games since we've gone to this BCS system, they're
Right.
they're often not impressive in those BCS bowls. And the bottom line for Ohio State, there's a reason that they're ranked third amongst those three undefeated teams. Haven't played anybody.
Absolutely not.
Yeah, they're playing better and better, but they're not on the level of Florida State and Alabama.
Absolutely.
And they're going to need help to get into the game.
Absolutely
And,
not.
and it's as simple as that.
Okay, so that covers last week. I was overall disappointed. You don't seem as down on the week as I
No,
was.
I wasn't.
Even with Notre Dame losing.
Even with Notre Dame losing, as I've told you throughout this year, I knew it was going to be a tough year for Notre Dame. When you have to suspend your quarterback
Right.
before the season even starts, you know what kind of year it's. And no knock on Tommy Rees, but you ain't winning a lot.
No.
You ain't winning 10 games on a major college level with Tommy Rees as your quarterback. I'm sorry. So I knew this season was coming for Notre Dame. I wasn't disappointed because I saw something from Stanford. And I saw something from Baylor.
That was good enough for you. You sat there Thursday night after you got home.
Did I want them to be great games?
And you said you were satisfied. You said, "Wow, these two games."
I wanted them to be great games. They weren't, but it didn't hurt me as much because I saw something. I knew Stanford could do that. We talked about that. I didn't necessarily pick them to win, but I picked them to cover.
No, you
and
didn't.
knew their physicality would be a factor. But what Baylor showed me, and I know they were sloppy and everything else, what they showed me against what is that perceived to be that level of competition, that was enough for me for the weekend because I took something out of that game that I didn't know that Baylor had.
Right.
There was a chance that they could have been Texas Tech.
Right. You see,
But they're not. That showed me something.
I was more down on Oklahoma and Oregon than I was impressed with Stanford and Baylor. I went on the negative route with those two teams.
Fair enough.
I couldn't believe how bad they played. I was so disappointed.
We'll have to agree to disagree.
There we go. But
let's see what what's this week going to bring us, because I know it's not a barn burner week in college football.
Let's go to the top 10. Now, Fresno is off this week.
Okay.
Northern Illinois plays home against Ball State on Wednesday, which is actually a big game in that conference.
Yeah.
I mean, but here's some of your top 10 games. And we're not going to pick these particular games. I got some games.
These are games we're not going to
These
pick,
games
but we'll talk about.
Right. Number 10, South Carolina is home for Florida. Florida's just a complete mess. Now Murphy looks like he's out. They might be going with their third-string quarterback. Florida is banged up all over the field.
Play Fred Taylor's kid at quarterback and run the single wing.
So we don't expect much there. Number 9,
South Carolina won that game.
Missouri is off this week.
They won't lose that one.
Clemson is home on Thursday night for Georgia Tech. They're not losing to Georgia Tech.
I don't think so, but anything can happen when you take on one of those teams that run that old school triple option, because it is assignment football.
Right.
Although in this generation where you play a lot against the spread and the read option, that advantage for Georgia Tech is not as large as it used to be. So I'm inclined to agree with you. Clemson is not going to lose in Death Valley to Georgia Tech.
Let me put number 7, Auburn, aside, because that's one game we're going to pick. Number 6, Oregon is home for Utah this week.
Well, they ain't losing at home.
They're not losing at home. I know the quarterback's questionable. Looks like he's going to play. I'm not picking Oregon this week. I am not picking their game at all. They are banned for this week.
So I can't express an opinion on it.
You absolutely cannot. I have had it with Oregon. They are banished for this week. And you know what? If they don't play well against Utah, they could be banished for the rest of the season.
Excellent.
So there we are. All right, now let's get back to Auburn. These are the games we are going to pick.
I'm ready.
Auburn is number 7. They are at home, -3 against number 25.
Is that a misprint?
You saw the spread there.
Yeah.
Let me say it again. Number 7 Auburn at home, -3 against number 25 Georgia. Now remember, Georgia has won 2 in a row over the big teams such as Florida and Appalachian State. That's gotten them back into the top 25, believe it or not. Auburn's won 6 in a row. They've bombed Tennessee. I agree with you. I thought this spread was this 13, was it 23?
Right, you went and checked 2 other sources and said, no, it's -3.
3 points? Are you kidding me?
And Nick Marshall's up. He's going to play. So injuries at the quarterback position aren't a factor.
No, absolutely. Now, this may be the reason this game is only 3 points. This is the Deep South's oldest rivalry in the history. This is the teams that have played the most in their history in the Deep South.
Oh,
you want to know what the all-time records are?
I'll take a stab. They're probably pretty close to even.
Very close. They've been playing since 1892. They played 116
the
times.
year after I was born.
Right. 116 times. 54, 54, and 8. They are dead even.
Dead even.
After 116 years.
I don't
of
think
football.
linesmakers look at that, but it's as good a theory as
I
any.
was trying to come up with a reason, like, why is this only 3 points? I guess people were impressed that Georgia beat Florida and Appalachian State.
No.
I guess Georgia is still...
I mean, Florida's shot. Everybody's hurt.
I guess
Georgia's pretty shot because everybody's hurt for them, too.
I guess they're still living off the fact that they won some games early in the season. They beat LSU.
Either that or people aren't a believer in Auburn.
No, absolutely not. I think the spread is way too low.
I do, too. I'm going to jump all over Auburn, laying only 3. I love Auburn comfortably in this game. Georgia has to do something against this top 10 competition, as banged up as they are, to make me a believer again.
No, absolutely. So we're in agreement. I think Auburn rolls in this game. To me, this is a misprint. I may have to double check this, but I checked a couple times. 3 points is way too low. Georgia doesn't have the horses to go in Auburn and win on the road. Not with all the guys banged up. Maybe before the injuries, but not now.
Right.
I mean, absolutely
exactly.
not.
I couldn't agree with you.
So we're taking Auburn. That's game number 1. Game number 2, number 5, Baylor.
Hey, the Bears.
Your Bears.
Go Bears.
-26 against Texas Tech, and this game is in Dallas, your favorite stadium.
The Jerry Jones Pleasure Palace. I always stop at the Victoria's Secret shop
I figured
before I
did.
go to see the game.
Baylor undefeated, blew out Oklahoma. Now Texas Tech is falling apart. Lost 3 in a row, and they're another team.
Make it 4.
Banged up all over the field. Baylor should score 63 points in this game. I think they cover the spread by the half. I have no faith in Texas Tech winning this game.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. Texas Tech is looking for a spot to get well. In theory, that spot was against Kansas State last week, and we've been down on Kansas State this year. We've talked about their bad quarterback play,
Playing a little
that
better.
it hasn't been a vintage Kansas State team. They have played better as the season's gone on. They've gotten better quarterback play. But for Tech, the place to get well was against Kansas State. They didn't do that.
No.
They've now lost 3 in a row. They're not getting well on a neutral field against the Baylor Bears. As you said, this one is probably over at halftime. Me and you were in lockstep so far.
Absolutely. Now, they didn't choose this game as the game day site, the Baylor game. They didn't choose this game as...
See, I would have thought the Jerry Jones Pleasure Palace would have been a great place to go for game day with a top 5 undefeated team.
Here's why they didn't do it. Now, they're going with our next pick here, Stanford-USC at the Coliseum. They're going out there for game day. The reason they didn't pick Baylor, next week, one of the few decent games next week.
See, you peeked ahead.
Baylor,
You're not supposed to do that.
Baylor at Oklahoma State. That is where they're going.
And that does have national title implications if Baylor takes care of their business. Because by then, Oklahoma State takes care of their business. They're probably ranked somewhere right around number 10.
Right.
And very quietly, they've done the slow climb off after the early season loss.
To West Virginia of all
If
teams.
Baylor wins that game, that could be the momentum they need to spring right to number 4. Or even number 3, because Ohio State doesn't play anybody either.
So that Baylor-Oklahoma State game a week from this Saturday, that's one of the few decent games that week. That's where they're going for College Game Day. If Baylor was to ever lose this week, they'd probably go to Fresno as a novelty against.
There you go. There's the novelty.
I mean,
right.
they have
Why not?
Next week, and we'll get
Fresno,
to that.
Northern Illinois, something
Yeah,
like
they
that.
have very little going on next week. Okay, so pick number 3. Number 4, Stanford, -3 at USC in the Coliseum. Game day will be there. USC is 7-3, but they've won 3 straight since they lost to Notre Dame. They beat Utah, Oregon State, and Cal, not the Goliaths of college football. They are playing a little better.
Oregon State's pretty good, though.
They're playing a little better. They're starting to score some points. The offense is actually doing things. They couldn't do anything to begin the season. Stanford, of course, off the big win against Oregon. Now they go on the road here. The spread is only 3. I like Stanford.
I do, too. The only concern I have is, does Stanford take the... and do one of those... And then get off to the sluggish start and maybe even get picked off?
I don't think so, because they have a loss and there's no time for this now.
Right. That's
they
a very
have
good
a
point.
loss.
Much like we talked about Florida State and their ability and their desire to keep the foot on the accelerator. We may see a lot of the same thing here. I think Stanford's better, and we've talked about USC's issues on offense, and they've gotten better there. Not against this physical Stanford team. So I'm kind of in lockstep with you here. I think Stanford covers the rather small number on the road.
No, absolutely. Let's not forget, USC lost to Notre Dame this year, and they are playing better, but I mean, other than Oregon State, it hasn't been against great teams. The spread's only 3. I mean, I think Stanford is much better than USC. I see Stanford winning this game by double digits myself.
I do too.
There you go. All right, so that is pick number 3. Pick number 4, number 3, Ohio State at Illinois. Ohio State favored by 32.
This is one of those tough games on your schedule.
Yeah, Illinois lost 5 straight. They gave up 40 points in like 4 of those games, so you know they're going to give up a bunch of points here. This is
one of those 63-7 matchups, isn't it?
This is another game where Ohio State lays the wood on someone. I mean, what is with this Ohio State schedule? Another one of these games.
Unfortunately, the Big Ten as a conference is down, and you pick that non-conference schedule so far in advance, you don't know that Cal's going to stink. You don't know that San Diego State's going to stink. And they've turned their season around, and that's the highlight of their non-conference schedule. Again, it's San Diego State. So they don't play anybody. Illinois, they're not very good. You chronicled it, losing 5 in a row. They've given up 40 in everyone. They're going to give up 60+.
Right.
And, the backup quarterback, who's almost as good as the starting quarterback, comes in. It doesn't slow down. Illinois has no chance of covering that number unless they stop the game at half.
Absolutely. So this game we think is over at the half. This is a complete demolition.
It's over now.
I agree. So just a complete blowout. We're in complete agreement there. Pick number 5. Here's another beaut. Number 2, Florida State at home, -39 against Syracuse. Believe it or not, Syracuse has a winning record. They beat Maryland last week. What happened to Maryland this year? They fell apart.
All banged up as well. The talent's not quite there. Randy Edsall's a terrific coach, and like when you're trying to make fresh squeezed orange juice, he squeezed everything he could out of that group.
Right.
But when having to, play with any level of consistency, or having to go on the road, or stepping up against better competition, they've come up short in all those scenarios. Syracuse, they're not that good.
No.
And they miss Ryan Nassib. And when they step up against competition like Florida State, I don't care where this game is, they're going to get buried.
It's in Tallahassee. Syracuse lost 56-0 at Georgia Tech. What are they going to lose by here? I mean, Florida State is bombing everyone. They're not giving up any points.
They're not taking their foot off the accelerator.
No, and look who Florida State is playing the next few weeks. Home for Syracuse, home for Idaho next week. At Florida.
Fighting Spuds.
Right. At Florida, and then the ACC title game, which could very well be Duke. Florida State's not losing this year.
No.
They are not losing a game.
Just sit there, take care of your business. You'll be in the BCS championship game. Your opponent remains to be seen.
Absolutely. So we're in agreement. This game is another just mess. You see what I'm looking at here?
I mean, it's not much. There ain't much to do on Saturday.
No.
Go out, eat dinner, smoke cigars, hang out, have fun.
Then our last...
Chase your girl around the house, whatever you want to do.
Our last pick here, number 1 Alabama, -23 at Mississippi State. And I don't want to hear about letdown after the LSU game. I don't want to hear about the cowbells at Mississippi State.
Well, you'll hear the cowbells for a while.
Mississippi State is 4-5. Mississippi State gave up 51 A&M, and they gave up 59 to LSU. I don't need to hear anymore. Alabama will shut this team out. Alabama's going to bombard Mississippi State. There's going to be no letdown here. Alabama blows out Mississippi State. This is not good.
This is the best of the best this week. Huh?
Look at the games we're talking about. Alabama, Mississippi State.
Can't even find anything to disagree with you on.
Alabama, Mississippi State, Florida State, Syracuse, Ohio State, Illinois, Stanford-USC, it's a decent game, Baylor-Texas Tech, Auburn, Georgia. We think the spread is way out of whack.
Right.
I mean, who else is? I mean, Oregon's playing Utah, Clemson's playing Georgia Tech, Missouri's off, South Carolina's playing Florida.
So I can take a college football Saturday. I pick my spots. I'll watch a little.
Fresno's off. I'll tell you, the Northern Illinois Ball State on Wednesday. That could be one of your better
That's
games.
the highlight of the weekend. Truth be told, you asked me about this game and you gave your thoughts on Alabama. I'm in lockstep with you. Mississippi State can't keep up with explosive offensive teams, and defensively they're not slowing down Alabama. Alabama throttles Mississippi State comfortably. I don't know if they look as good as they have each and every week over the last few weeks, but I certainly think they have too many weapons on offense and too many answers on defense that Mississippi State's going to be limited with answers even in Starks.
No, absolutely. But, Joe, like I'm saying, the top 10, no team in the top 10, I think, is facing a team in the top 25. I mean, you want to give me Georgia's ranked 25. I mean, they're a paper 25 as far as I'm concerned. Look at these.
The bottom of the top 25 is all paper. It's the Va-Techs, and it's the Miamis, and it's the Georgias of the world, and these are teams that are either not very good or all banged up.
Let me give you these games real quick once again. Fresno's off. Northern Illinois Ball State. South Carolina's home for Florida. Awful. Missouri's off. Clemson home for Georgia Tech on Thursday. Auburn's home for Georgia. Oregon's home for Utah. I mean, Baylor playing Texas Tech in Dallas. Stanford's playing at USC. That's probably the best game of the weekend. Ohio State at Illinois. Florida State home for Syracuse. And Alabama at Mississippi State. That is an awful weekend.
That's bad. That's bad.
That's an awful week.
That's as bad as the week they were in Florida.
And let me say this. The best game, Stanford-USC. Stanford has a loss and USC has 3 losses.
That's not a great game.
That's the best game we could come up with.
That's not a great game, not a great matchup, and that one could be over pretty quickly. I don't think that necessarily will, but it could be over fairly quickly.
So this, without a doubt, it may not be as bad as the week they were in Fargo.
It's close.
It's close.
It's real close.
It's definitely in the top 3, if not the top 2. I'll tell you what, I was looking at next week's schedule.
Just as bad?
Let me give it to you.
Fire it up, man.
Chattanooga at Alabama.
Well, Chattanooga has a chance right up until they
Chattanooga at Alabama. I mean,
well, that's the
they play 2 of those this year. Though,
I know we talked about that. Usually they only play 1, and it's always right before the Iron Bowl. They played 2 this year.
Idaho at Florida State. Are you kidding me? I mean, are you kidding me?
Talk about mashing potatoes.
Indiana.
Did I just say that?
Yeah, Indiana at Ohio State, and I know you like Indiana more than I do.
They're not going to win a game.
They're not winning in Ohio State.
And if that's the marquee matchup of the weekend, not so fast, my friend.
Cal at Stanford. I mean, I know it's the big game. Not this year. It ain't going to be. That's a 56-0.
That's the big blowout.
The big blowout. Oregon and Arizona has now lost all its luster because Arizona lost again.
It's a watchable football game.
It's lost a lot of luster. Oregon just got
You're just
pounded.
mad at the Ducks right now.
I am at them.
It's a watchable football.
Let me continue. New Mexico at Fresno.
Boy. Yeah. Definitely not watchable.
Northern Illinois at Toledo. Coastal Carolina at South Carolina. You can't.
Well, there's the that's the play-in game. You know, that's that bye-week game where the payoff game where some bad program, a small program, comes to an SEC school, they trounce them, and then they play their big rivalry game or finish up the SEC slate.
Citadel at Clemson. You can't make this up. I mean, did you...
What's Clemson's excuse? They're not in the SEC.
Right.
But all right.
So I found 4 maybe decent games. I'm going to throw them out at you. Arizona State at UCLA, I guess, is decent.
It's potentially for the Pac-12 South crown.
But still, it's not
being so fussy.
A great game.
Great, no.
A&M at LSU. LSU now has 3 losses. I mean...
That's an entertaining game because between the 2 teams, they're going to put up about 100. Neither team can stop anybody.
There's no drama there. LSU's got 3 losses.
No, when you get this late in the year, there's only a drama for about a half a dozen teams. Everybody else is just playing out the string.
Here's a good game. Missouri at Ole Miss. I think that's going to be a good game.
All right.
Why
do you like that? You don't like LSU and Texas A&M.
Well, I
guess there's some drama left for Missouri.
Absolutely. They can get to the SEC title game.
Right,
and they only have 1 loss. LSU has 3.
Okay.
And, of course, you like the Grove there in Ole Miss.
Yes, I do.
Now, to me, the best game of next week, and I think this is where they're going to College Game Day. They don't have many choices. Baylor at Oklahoma State.
They have to.
That's where they're going.
That's a good game.
That's a good game. It's not a great game. Oklahoma State lost to West Virginia. It's definitely the best game of the weekend. It's not. It's not a great game.
There's not a ton of sex appeal. There's not a ton of great games. Unlike this week, where I'm struggling to find something to watch, I can find something to watch next week. I'm really hard pressed to find anything that I can sit down in front of for 3 hours this week.
But here's the problem I have. Number 1, 2, 3, 4, they're all playing these losers.
We'll make up for it in 2 weeks.
I mean, absolutely. Thanksgiving week is the best, to me, the best week of college football when you have those rival games. Auburn, Alabama.
I'll bring a wishbone with me. We'll break it. We'll see who's going to get their wish granted.
No, absolutely. Auburn, Alabama, Florida State. The list goes on and on. That Thanksgiving.
Michigan, Ohio State.
That weekend is to die for. But the next 2 weeks, this week I think is awful.
Apple Cup, Civil War.
Right.
It's all of that.
Arizona State. I love all those. UCLA, USC. All those games I love. But this week is atrocious.
Next week's not great either.
No, I think
I can find some things to watch next week. This week I don't think I can find anything to watch. I mean, I'll be watching. It's my job. But if you ask me if I was just a guy who was a college football fan, I'd be struggling to find something to watch.
Yeah, so you would say this week is definitely worse than next week coming.
No question about it.
See, I think they're both miserable, and I'm already disappointed by last week's game. I haven't recovered from that, and the Oregon Ducks.
College football's losing.
Oh, Oregon.
Come on, get back in. You got to come back.
Oregon really, really did it to me. I was so disappointed in their effort. I just couldn't believe they were just an atrocious.
Any beefs? You fans in Eugene, any beefs? Send them directly to mine.
I've been high on Oregon this year. I always pick them in Eugene, but I mean that
to get you the Velcro jacket, you take the Oregon Ducks on and put something else on.
But not for nothing, Joe.
Right.
That was supposed to be a big game. They didn't play it like it was a big game. They were sleepwalking during that game. I didn't even like the way they were coached in that game, going for it on 4th and 4 in the first quarter. No.
You're dead on right about they didn't bring the intensity level of a big game situation. Again, they did what Oregon does, that unconventional, we go for it in these spots, and I've gotten used to that from coach to coach to coach.
You know what? Let me jump in
and it's always worked for them.
Let me jump in
So all
there.
of a sudden, when it doesn't work, you can't jump on them.
Let me jump in there. I don't like it when they do it. I didn't like it when they did it years ago. I don't like when they do it.
Then you're not being inconsistent, so it's okay.
I don't like when they're up 6-0, they go for 2 to make it.
I've always hated that.
You know what I think they do?
You know me, I don't believe in wasting points.
You know what I think they're doing when they do that? I think they're disrespecting the game and they're disrespecting their opponent. Like, hey, we're Oregon. We can score 100 points if we don't get this 2-point conversion here. What's the big deal? We're going to put up 73 anyway, so instead of scoring 74 points, we'll score 73. To me, they're disrespecting the game and disrespecting their opponent, and I don't like that. They can get away with that against Cal. They can't get away with that against Stanford. That's
and it came back to bite them on the ass.
That is what I do not like, and you see all these teams doing it. Utah did it last week. They went for 2 down 7.
Cost them.
Unbelievable.
Do not chase point. If any of you coaches out there, I don't know how many coaches watchers, if you have questions about how to use that 2-point conversion sheet, get a hold of me. I'll show you how to do it. It's really not that hard. What you should do, if it's anything, if you're within 2 scores, even 3 scores, until you get to the 4th quarter, put the 2-point conversion sheet in your back pocket and don't look at it until very late in the 3rd quarter. And that's only if you're 3 scores. If you're 2 scores or less, don't look at that 2-point conversion sheet until you absolutely have to. You go for it as late as you can, and you extend the football game.
I think Oregon has become so arrogant that they don't even think about what you're saying.
Guess what? They can be as arrogant as they want.
Right.
Guess what they're not doing this year?
Absolutely.
Playing the BCS title.
Absolutely.
So there you go. There's to your arrogance.
They've become so arrogant that they don't even care about charts, when you should go for it. They just think they can do it whenever they want.
Well, I'm giving this as a rule all these coaches, because sometimes you look at you're going for 2 in the 2nd quarter?
They did it last night.
When you're down 3 and 4 scores, now you start looking at trimming, and I get it. But generally, 3 scores and 2 scores, you go for that 2-point conversion as late as you can.
Absolutely.
Because you keep yourself in the game, and you keep yourself with opportunities, and you keep it as few a score a game as you can. and then you go for it as late as you can, because when you don't make it, you're chasing points, and you'll never make up chasing those points.
I absolutely agree. So we are in agreement. This is just an atrocity.
We can't find games to disagree on. It's an awful schedule.
And when Stanford-USC is your big game,
it's not a marquee match.
You're in trouble. Will you even be watching that game? Is that a DVR for you?
No, for me, I'll be watching. This is my job. This is what I have to do.
I thought maybe the DVR was going to go on for that one.
I don't think so. Right. During the day, the DVR will be on, and I'll take a look at a couple of things. Maybe at some point in the afternoon, I'll jump to the ESPN, their version of the whip around coverage.
Right. We get all the games.
Right, and I'll take a look at what's going on. But as far as that, it's only that marquee matchup. Other than that, I'm not paying much attention other than some whip around coverage.
I agree totally. Now tonight, I guess it's an NBA, NHL, college basketball night. Is this
college basketball night? Yeah, those two matchups are great.
You got number 1 UK against number 2 Michigan State, and you got number 4 Duke against number 5 Kansas in Chicago.
And again, we talked about this off the air, and you made the point that early in a year like this, these matchups are a little sloppy because they don't have an exhibition season of any degree in college basketball, much like they don't in college football.
Yeah.
It might be sloppy, but that's certainly an entertaining early season, early November matchup. And for many of us, we really don't start looking at much college basketball. You start looking at it during Thanksgiving time when you have things like the Great Alaska Shootout going on and everything else. This is a little earlier for some marquee matchups. But boy, in a schedule that doesn't have much going on, this is where my attention is.
Yeah, and you also have Florida at Wisconsin tonight, which is a decent game as well. Do you like Dick Vitale, by the way?
I don't dislike him, but
I'm sure he's going to be going crazy in one of these games.
He can't scream as much as he used to because of the bad throat.
The throat surgery, right?
But what I will tell you is BYU impressed me last night.
Yes, they were very good.
A good win against Stanford.
Yes,
and
I watched that game from Maples.
Gonzaga and Pepperdine and St. Mary's out of the West Coast Conference should be on alert. BYU's coming for you.
No, they
and that's something we'll talk about when we talk college basketball.
They looked good last night.
BYU's very good. And the West Coast Conference with BYU and Gonzaga and St. Mary's is going to be a pretty darn good small conference this year. And BYU is going to be right in the thick of it.
Absolutely. Who on the East Coast besides me and you stayed up to watch BYU Stanford last night from Maples Pavilion?
Right, exactly.
Only two maniacs like me and you.
You're sitting there. You get done watching a Monday night football game where one team showed up and one team really didn't.
Miami
carries the ball 14 times for 2 yards, and you know they're going to be distracted. You say, okay, I'm through this. Boom. Right to BYU, Stanford from Maples. I said, I got to take a look at BYU. I've thought a lot of them coming in, and boy, they impressed.
You know, the Dolphins getting back to that Monday Night Football game, that is the least amount of rushing yards the Dolphins had in their history. They've played 750 games.
Well, let's put it this way. They had 2 more yards rushing than I did last night.
Right.
And guess what? I didn't play in an NFL football game.
They said that was the least amount of rushing yards they had in their history in any game. I found that unbelievable.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't believe it. So
you want to talk about a team that came in distracted and you expected this.
Oh, yeah.
When we picked this game on the Spano and Black Attack, I knew that both Bob and I knew, we said the same thing. Tampa Bay's going to win this game. They're going to pick up their first win.
They've been close.
Put Jacksonville right back at the top of the Teddy Bridgewater sweepstakes.
No, absolutely. So tonight, college basketball.
That's where my attention.
Now tomorrow, NFL picks, wall-to-wall NFL, and I promise you, the NFL slate is a lot better than the college football.
Yeah,
slate.
you're starting to get into some division matchups, and it's going to start to get interesting as the rest of the NFL season unfolds. As these past couple of weeks, it hasn't been a great NFL slate either. That's going to start to turn around from here on out as you get a lot of division matchups and you got a lot of matchups that could shape the playoffs in the NFL.
So we're going to be doing our NFL picks tomorrow. The NFL slate is very good this week. Joe, tell them where they can find you, of course.
Real quick, the show's the Spano and Black Attack, 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern Time via the Sports Byline Broadcast Network. Go to www.sportsbyline.com. You can click on the Listen Live link, or you can find us on Sirius XM Radio, or you can find a local affiliate in your area. Just click on the affiliate site. We got a whole bunch of affiliates all over the country. WPIX Morning News before and after New York Giants or New York Jets Monday or Thursday matchups, 6:45 a.m. Eastern Time on WPIX.
Okay, there you go, Joe. Thanks for being here as
always.
Always
A pleasure.
Guys, thanks for the support. We will do NFL picks tomorrow, and please do not read this article on Oregon football in Sports Illustrated. Throw this out. Do not even bother reading it. You guys, I'll talk to you tomorrow. NFL picks coming. Thanks.